Good day. I'm Jim Winship, Senior Diplomatic Correspondent for Diplomatic Connections magazine. We're here at the Embassy of Azerbaijan in Washington today and speaking with Ambassador Ilan Suleimanov. Azerbaijan, as you may know, is a Transcaucasian republic on the Caspian Sea, and since its independence from the Soviet Union after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Azerbaijan has become a very important regional player and increasingly a very important player in international energy and now international security markets as well. Ambassador Suleimanov, can you tell us just a little bit? Our viewers are always interested in career streams, how you came to be here. How did you decide to become a diplomat?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. for being here.
Our pleasure.
It's a pleasure to welcome you at the embassy. I think it's not really a matter of choice at that point. I always dreamed about Azerbaijan being an independent country. I think many of us have in the country. So when Azerbaijan became an independent nation, I think there was a great shortage of professionals who could do that, and who could represent the country, who could be a part of this. And what you see today are the people who have decided to join the foreign service, to join the public service, as part of their contribution to building a new independent nation. It's true for our president, it's true for our foreign minister, it's true for many of our professionals. In fact, many of us in the foreign service are not professional diplomats, with some exception. Actually, foreign minister is, and our president is a graduate of a diplomatic school. I went to a diplomatic school after I served for my first term as a diplomat. One of the interesting choices I made and I'm very proud of that work I had, working with UNHCR, UN High Commission for Refugees in Azerbaijan. Yes. A very, very strong organization, very honorable organization. After working with them for a year, I realized that I could probably do more if I joined Azerbaijan's foreign service and contribute perhaps more directly to what our country does. And I was very honored that then foreign minister did invite me to join the foreign service, and I was of course honored by the posting here, which is our premier embassy under the leadership of Ambassador Pashayev, the now deputy foreign minister and the director of the diplomatic academy. And then after serving here, I went back to Azerbaijan, worked at the office of the president, and it so happened that once again I was honored by the president's decision to be sent to Los Angeles to launch our first diplomatic mission on the West Coast. It was a very high responsibility, but I also have to say it's a very great pleasure to be here.
Let me ask you, Ambassador, because I honestly have no good feel for this. Is there a sizable Azerbaijani community here in the United States?
Indeed, there is. It is partly in California, partly in Washington D.C. area, in New York, Chicago area, some Houston today, for instance, hosts. We just recently inaugurated the Azerbaijani Cultural Center in Houston, Texas. So our community is coming up. It's still
energy all leads to Houston somehow, doesn't it?
Actually, it's interesting because what you have in Houston is a group of people who are young professionals. They're not immigration which came here, mostly not immigration which came here during the Soviet years, but many of them are new, younger Azerbaijanis who are professionals who worked in the energy sphere, worked in the energy-related businesses, and came to move to the United States. Many of them are Western educated, many of them are fluent English speakers. So it's a very interesting group of Azerbaijanis living in the United States. Azerbaijani American community is growing up. It's become more organized. We have new organizations such as US Azeris Network, Azerbaijan American Council, the Azerbaijan Society of America, which has been here, I think, since 1959. So we're getting much greater activity. And I don't know if you have noticed recently on the congressional side, there was much greater recognition of the Azerbaijani community. So they're reaching out more to the elected officials. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. We're very happy to see that.
Now, I want to go back, lest we lose the thread, to your education a bit. You studied here in the United States.
Yes, I studied in Azerbaijan, in Moscow, Russia, and also twice in the United States.
And once at Tufts.
Once at Fletcher,
At
Tufts,
Fletcher
yes,
School.
and once at the University of Toledo. I think this is actually a good question. I was asked once about that. Fletcher is for me, is the premier, and I would argue, and I'll ask anybody.
I warn you, I'm a size
I know, and please forgive me for that. I know size and SIFA
I know.
and
I'm
KSG,
kidding.
but I have to say that what Fletcher offers is quite unique, both in terms of the curriculum, but also in terms of the people you meet, especially the student body. It's quite unique in its own, and I'm very proud to be a graduate of Fletcher. And I look back at this, and I think that was a very, very enhancing experience. At the same time, when I first came to America in 1992 as a Muskie program, a graduate, a Muskie fellow.
Right.
And
That program named then after former Secretary of State.
yeah, it's actually ironic because it began as Ben Franklin Fellowship, and then it turned into Muskie Fellowship. And I hear some noises that it might be that program must be defunded by Congress, which would be very sad because it's been a very uniquely useful program for the exchange in the former Soviet Union. I came to Toledo, Ohio, and Toledo, Ohio, excuse me, is, let me put it this way, had I not come first time in America to Toledo, Ohio, to a Midwestern city as Toledo, I don't know if I would have the same appreciation for the United States. I think people in the Midwest are very open and very warm. It was a turning point for me. I came to America, you have all the stereotypes, you have see these old Hollywood movies, you're afraid to go to Detroit because people shoot each other in the streets and all. And I'd never been to America before.
Of course.
So you come to Toledo and you see people are very warm, very open. And I think my own appreciation for the United States comes from Midwest, comes from Toledo, Ohio. And I think the best remedy and the best recipe to make America more popular and more welcome throughout the world is, in fact, increasing this kind of exchanges, including sending people to the Midwestern cities. I think that helps a lot.
It's really interesting because it's a constant battle. You started your education outside the Beltway, and then obviously Boston and Fletcher's not inside the Beltway, but it's part of the traditional diplomatic training. But it is so important and a constant battle when groups of international visitors, even officials in Russia, historically, and the importance of Russian language and culture. Is that equally true for the younger generation, or is it attenuating somewhat?
Definitely, the use of Azerbaijani language has significantly increased. And it's an official language of the country. It's a language which is in much greater use today than it used to be in the Soviet Union, though it was used in the Soviet Union, I must say. Azerbaijani population has always been bilingual, at least bilingual. So I think even though there is a much greater use of Azerbaijani language today, officially, there is and the Russian cultural presence is not the only one.
Of course.
Now you have Turkish influence, you have influence, the English language media and culture is there. And Azerbaijan is very open to different influences. I still think because Russia is a large country, because it's a big partner and a big neighbor, there's limits to how far you could go. Right. And definitely because of the literature, because of the media, because of the entertainment, the Russian language is quite well represented in Azerbaijan.
Well, this also goes back to your identity as an independent nation, because frankly you were so long a part of the Soviet system, and then at the collapse of the Soviet Union, you're pulled for obvious reasons westward rather than eastward, looking at the Western European economies, looking at NATO, but so that you're in a sense walking a bit of a tightrope between identities there, maintaining Azerbaijan's identity, recognizing you've got the historic Russian routes, you're looking westward as well, and some pressure there, as I understand it, for example, with pipeline routes and so forth, to develop routes that don't go through Russia because of security concerns in Western Europe. So how, I guess what I'm really asking is, how do you orchestrate that, being pulled westward and being rooted eastward in some way?
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. You actually gave a very interesting description of what happens there. I think two things are very important. One is that the key to that is two points. One is being pragmatic, as we discussed earlier.
Yes.
The second one is being confident. One of the interesting things about Azerbaijan, and I think that's a key to understand why Azerbaijani culture, Russian language and Russian culture is quite well present in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has always been an open and tolerant society. We talked about that. It's diverse and inclusive. There are many different influences and all this. Many different communities, be it Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and all this. For us, the use of Russian language does not represent a threat to our identity. It might be different in other places, I don't know. But I can speak for Azerbaijan that one of the reasons why we do not see an issue with the use of Russian language, we know who we are. We have no questions where we stand. We respect the Russian culture, we respect the Russian people, we respect the Russian language. It's a in fact, it's a beautiful language. We all learned Lermontov and Pushkin and Dostoevsky and Chekhov. But it doesn't affect the fact who we are. Same with the English. I mean, we could speak English all we want, but we're Azerbaijanis, and that's who we are. That's the country we belong to. The choice, I think, of working with the West towards Western and Euro-Atlantic integration, be it to NATO partnerships, to energy security project and now we're working on a southern corridor, natural gas corridor with Turkey and Georgia. Now, those are pragmatic choices for the future of the country. We make those choices not because we want to go east or west, but because that's what serves the interests of the Republic of Azerbaijan the best. Sometimes, for instance, investment decisions are made with Japanese or Chinese or Koreans simply because they offer the best, the best conditions for them. So those are pragmatic decisions. Having said that, I don't see in foreseeable future a true alternative to the Western orientation. At this point, that's a reality. The other reality is that in terms of values, that also makes it almost easier, because at the end of the day, as we talked about Azerbaijan's aspirations in general, values of openness, tolerance, and democratic development do correspond to what we believe as a nation.
Is Azerbaijan able to play a role in its relationships with NATO, with the United States, as a sort of window on Iran? I mean, are there insights you can provide or have provided that help us understand Iran better than we might otherwise?
Hard to say. I think in a way, as I said, Azerbaijanis in Azerbaijan and in Iran share the same culture in many ways, same language, so that probably would provide you some insight on what feelings are within Iran. But at the same time, I think we keep urging both our friends in Iran and our friends in the West to take a more pragmatic view. And we talked about pragmatism.
That word comes up a lot.
To think about the future of their own people, and to make sure that whatever disagreements are, they are driven by a desire to find a peaceful solution for whatever disagreements. In fact, we're talking about much bigger place than Azerbaijan in terms of just population and size. It's almost ironic that we need to urge them to be more pragmatic. But Azerbaijan's decision making is not ideological, as we talked about. And we hope that the decisions, whatever decisions are made, about Iran and by Iran are not ideological either.
Understood. I haven't avoided it, I wanted to build up to it, and that is the question of Nagorno-Karabakh and the relationship, the tensions, and the bloodshed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Can you help us? I think most Americans have forgotten, I think, by now, Nagorno-Karabakh, though it was in the headlines for a great deal of time. Can you help our readers, can you help our country understand the nature of that dispute and the fact that it is scaled down, certainly in terms of violence, but still very present in terms of tension between the two countries?
It's, I think, perhaps was the most important and the most difficult question for everybody, for us, all of us. And let me try to be as brief as possible, because, as you said, in the early 90s, if you don't consider the war in the Balkans, that was the most violent conflict in Europe.
Yes.
The war between Armenia and Azerbaijan did not end. It was basically ceased. The activities were ceased as a result of the ceasefire in 1994, and it's been lasting on and off since then, but mostly holding. The Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict actually precedes the independence of Azerbaijan and
Yes.
Armenia. It actually appeared in 1988, 3 years before the independence. In many ways, it's very simple. What we're talking about is an occupation or an annexation of a territory of a neighboring state. Armenia, with the help of some other countries, has used military force to expel about 1 million of Azerbaijani civilians. It's about, imagine at that point there was 7.5 million people in Azerbaijan, 1 million of them became refugees and IDPs. Third, ethnic cleansing, nobody lives in the occupied territories. And ethnically dominated enclave, which basically used military force to push people out and take over foreign territory, which is non-recognized, and I don't think it has any prospects for recognition. In fact, all of the international community, with the exception of Armenia, recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. This is internationally recognized Azerbaijani territory. A number, about 4 UN Security Council resolutions call for the withdrawal of Armenian troops, and nobody, even Armenia, recognizes the so-called regime in Nagorno-Karabakh. So these are and you know, there's a Minsk group, US, France, and Russia are the co-chair, co-mediators of the peace process, which goes on and been going on for 2 decades. This year actually was the 20 years of the Minsk group.
Right.
Those are all details of the agreement. Those are the facts. But I think we need to understand a little bit more about that. The very simple essence goes to the very simple fact. Azerbaijan, once again, is a diverse society. In Azerbaijan, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, what your religion is. You could live in Azerbaijan and be citizen of Azerbaijan regardless of who you are. It depends on what you do. Unfortunately, our Armenian neighbors, and Armenia today is an absolutely homogeneous society, 99.9% ethnically Armenian, do not see that way. They don't understand that you could be a person of a certain ethnicity and live in a country which is different from. So in a way, if Armenians live somewhere, that has to be Armenia. And if you live in Armenia, you have to be Armenian. And that's the essence of the claims against Azerbaijan, essence of the claims against Turkey, essence of the claims against Georgia. It's not limited to Azerbaijan itself. After living in the United States for quite a while, I would look back and say that Americans probably share Azerbaijani understanding of civic identity. Because otherwise, what would end up, the Armenian solution for the conflict, for this kind of situations, is basically ethnic cleansing. There is the ethnically driven identity leaves you no options but ethnic cleansing. We don't see that as a good option. Now, I personally served as a UNHCR officer, I told you that.
Yes.
And I served to Azerbaijani refugee camps and IDP camps. I've seen firsthand what it is. The devastation that conflict brought to women's health, children's education, who never seen their homes, who grew up in the dugouts, who grew up in railway cars, who never seen water and sanitation to a good extent. I'm very proud of the work UNHCR had done in Azerbaijan, but I also understood that at the end of the day, this is the Republic of Azerbaijan which will have to solve these issues. And I'm very proud to say that the first transfers from the Azerbaijani Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is an oil fund of Azerbaijan, were actually directed at improving the conditions of our IDPs and displaced communities. And today Azerbaijan perhaps is the only country in the world which has such a significant number of displaced communities, which has addressed that issue to its own means. We have no more camps, people live in temporary housing, it's clean, it's respected. This is a good thing, this is what Azerbaijan does. We are not going to treat our citizens with disrespect only because they fell victim to ethnic cleansing.
From Azerbaijan's point of view, is there a solution? I mean, must the territory that has been occupied by Armenia be returned? Is there a possible compromise? If I am Armenian, just to play devil's advocate for a minute, of course everything is played.
I don't consider Armenians to be devils, by the way.
No, I said devil's advocate for a minute, but understood. But I mean, the Armenian position would be, historically we are a people who suffered a genocide. And if we do not protect ourselves and our fellow cultural countrymen, then no one will protect us.
Yes, but we need to look at the reality. Whatever happened in Armenian history, and I would probably not agree with the term of genocide, but
that's fine.
Whatever the history,
it is a term that's often used.
Yes, but it's a claim which Armenians voice, but that's not an issue by itself. If you look at the reality today, Azerbaijan does not occupy a single inch of the Armenian territory. We have not used force to take over someone's territory. And overwhelming and just unbelievably overwhelming, it's like 1 to 10 numbers of displaced and victims of the conflict are on Azerbaijani side. Armenians did not do it by themselves, they were helped. I mean, at this point there are about several bases of the Russian Federation in Armenia. In fact, the Armenian borders are guarded by the Russian troops today, border guard. So to say that we are the victims, nobody is going to protect us, is kind of not extremely sincere. Now that might be the perception.
No, and that's what I was trying to get at. There's an emotional content to this.
I think here you come to the very important point. And what you offer also logically leads to a solution of the conflict. Look, we all have histories. Azerbaijan has suffered for centuries from different invasions, our people have been attacked and slaughtered. You have two choices to make in your life. You either look for the future or you look back and lament, it's like people, it's like humans. Every individual has to make their choice. You either look back and lament about all kinds of things which happened to you, or did not happen to you, or you perceive them as happened to you, or you did, it doesn't matter. The perception, if the perception is there, the perception is there. Or you look forward and say, what do I do? How do I build a country which will be sustainable? How do I make the best of my own existence? We spoke earlier about the Russian culture in Azerbaijan. I mean, Russia and Azerbaijan had quite interesting history, let's put it that way. It was positive, but it also had some tense moments.
Of course.
And you've seen the history of the Russian invasions and all. We can lament all our lives about Russia being that and this and this. Or we could come down and say, look, what we have had is our common history. Common successes, common tragedies, common failures, common aspirations. Let us build on that to build a new partnership in the region. And that's what we're trying to do. They have to make their decision. Do they want to be a part of the region, or they want to be an ethnicity-driven group of people, basically a tribe, which is not a state? Because you mentioned something very interesting. The word pragmatic. I couldn't fail to notice that what you describe to me as an emotional feelings are not pragmatic. So if you look about history, if you look about how do we were hurt, this is not a pragmatic decision. The leaders of Armenia have to sit down and say, what is the best for the economy of our people, what is the best for the future of my people, and how to avoid whatever history happened to Armenia before, how to avoid it from happening again. What is the best way? If you look at Europe, that's an example. Germans, French, and British, you will still watch the movies about them trying to kill each other.
Of course.
But they have managed to build a union, they have managed to overcome these problems. And they now have quite an exemplary cooperation. So I think our region can do that, but the Armenian leaders need to make their decision.
It is, we've seen it in the Balkans, we've seen it in Transcaucasia, the whole issue of, and you put it very well, of history's role in identity and holding to a memory, but not clutching that memory so closely that you dwell in the past, to use your phrase.
You never forget, it makes it part of your identity.
Right.
But you also learn your lessons.
And move on.
Move towards the future, of course.
Yes. Let me change directions just a little bit, something we have literally talked about around geographically, the role of the Caspian Sea. Obviously your energy industry is centered on the Caspian. It's an odd body of water.
It's a very nice body of water.
I haven't seen it. I'm fascinated by the international lawyers' discussions about whether it should be a lake or a sea, which has international implications. But I guess most important are the issues of energy and boundaries within the Caspian.
Yes. Well, first, Caspian is a beautiful sea. It's our common treasure. And I can't say we treated it all very nicely. It's unfortunately it's being polluted. Probably the greatest treasure of the Caspian is not the oil, but the caviar and the sturgeon. I grew up
which are endangered.
Which is very endangered, yes. Yeah. Not only because of me, I don't eat that much.
No, it wasn't assigning responsibility.
I have to say that I grew up on the Caspian Sea. It's a home for us. It's a weather-born sea. You fall in love with it the moment you see it. It's a very historic place. So much of a culture, world affairs happened around. Since 1994, Azerbaijan has begun working with the Western companies to build on the existing history of the Caspian energy development. And I think we've done quite well in terms of bringing energy partners into the region. The Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, now the gas pipelines. If you look back, Caspian region, Baku was the first ever oil city of the oil boom in 1900s. In 1910, I think Baku produced about 50% of global energy supplies. And there was this famous video with Adolf Hitler when he was asked at the birthday in 1943. He was given a cake with Eurasia on it, map of Eurasia. What do you want? And there was a video. It's kind of scary video when he cuts off Baku and the Caspian Sea. This is what I want. Because he knew if he gets there, he could have won the war. And so Baku and the oil production in Azerbaijan became one of the key factors of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany. Boundaries, it's a legal dispute, which we will want to see resolved as soon as possible, of course. We have developed a very clear demarcation with the Russian Federation and with Kazakhstan. The two of our the 5 little states also, Russia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan and Iran. With Kazakhstan and Russia, issues are pretty much solved, everybody knows what they are. There is, of course, an understanding between Azerbaijan among all the countries, including Iran and Turkmenistan, where the boundaries should lie. For some reason, political, geopolitical, or otherwise, that process takes longer than it should, perhaps. But it had not been a major issue. Of course, if someone wants to make it a big issue, anything can become an issue, from environment to legal division. But as you see over the last 20 years, it had not been a major impediment to development. And Azerbaijani sector of the Caspian is very rich in energy resources, and so we believe the other sectors. And Azerbaijan has developed itself and will continue to do so. Our fields are in the offshore. And we think the others should too, and the Caspian region should take its due place as a key contributor to the global energy security.
Let me ask about the environmental issue. I mean, what's being done? I mean, there's so much about, for example, here in Washington, cleaning up the Chesapeake with very mixed results, certainly. What is the approach to dealing with the environment in the Caspian at this point?
I think one is, of course, UNDP has a Caspian environmental program, United Nations Development Program. So there's a conversation. Most importantly, however, if you look at the standards which were applied by the Western companies since they came to Azerbaijan in 1994, they were so much higher in reality than what was used by the Soviet time production, which was outdated and leaking and all this. By the developing the partnership with Western companies and bringing in international expertise, Azerbaijan has already contributed to cleaning up the sea because there was just much less pollution than
yes.
Now don't forget that the companies came to Azerbaijan with a certain understanding of corporate responsibility, which was not there in the 1960s, 1970s. In a way, thanks God, we're the beneficiaries of their previous experiences and lessons learned. So by itself, I think the best way to deal with environmental issues is to apply the new technologies, the newest, move forward in terms of development of your own infrastructure. And of course, once you have that, you begin looking at when the level of the economic development in the country goes up, so does the desire for environmental protection. Mm-hmm. And for instance, State Oil Company of Azerbaijan declared the year, I think, 2010 as an environmental year. So at their own expense, they have cleaned up quite a lot of onshore fields and all this. So the work is going on quite actively there.
And coming to the United States, it's hard to get them off one of the three coasts. I mean, either the East Coast, the West Coast, or the Gulf Coast, especially with oil-producing nations. And yet, over and over again, I hear from diplomatic colleagues, just as you have said, that a transformative experience for them was seeing America from the interior out rather than from the coastlines.
Absolutely right. By now I have visited 46 states, and I think that's quite a lot actually. It's
4 to go. What have you missed?
Well, may not name them because that would be highly undiplomatic. I'll tell you on the record.
No, that's fine.
But I have to say that they're actually, it's amazing, and the diversity of the United States, the openness of the people, and you're right. You got to get out of the beltway. You have to be outside the coast. Although I do like both coasts, and I'm especially fascinated by the West Coast, where I spent my last 5.5 years. But it's important to go in the country. Part of it, actually, I'm very appreciative of what the Office of the Protocol does here in the United States. Ambassador Patricia Marshall has been very instrumental with a program called Experience America. She took us to Los Angeles, she took us to Arkansas. There was a trip to Yellowstone, unfortunately I couldn't join. Those are very, very useful experiences. The last one in Arkansas was just eye-opening in terms of introducing us to the culture. So that was very good.
If I look back at that, I should say, first of all, I was really trying to get you invitations to the 4 states that you missed. That's why I asked. But let's move on for a second. You've hinted at them, but what have been your previous postings, and especially postings outside the United States?
Oh, I wasn't posted outside the United States. If we look at the diplomatic history of of Azerbaijan and the United States, this year, as a matter of fact, earlier this year, we celebrated 20 years of diplomatic relationship. It was a very strong celebration, very nice celebration, both in February with participation of Assistant Secretary Gordon, and then a big convention in Washington, with the members of Congress participating. But it's 20 years. Next year we will mark the 20th anniversary opening of the embassy here in Washington DC. So if you look at that for a diplomat like myself, there are not that many postings you could have possibly had.
Yes, that's right.
Since I already had, that's my third posting as a diplomat. So if you take them, that's pretty much makes up.
Understood.
No.
Diplomatically, this is a young relationship.
Yes.
It's also a relationship that had a turning point in it of sorts, and that turning point was 9/11/2001. In some ways, I mean, there was more of a more rapid development of a strategic relationship, certainly between the United States and Azerbaijan after that event.
Yes and no, and let me tell
That's
you.
fine. That's fine.
Let me explain what I mean. I was here at the embassy when 9/11 happened. It was a very tragic day, of course, for all of us. One of the most notable things that Azerbaijan is one of the first countries to offer unconditional support to the United States. Because of the time difference, it was about, I would say, 6 to 7 p.m. in Azerbaijan. The former President Heydar Aliyev immediately gathered the National Security Council and made the decision to offer all we can to support the United States. Not only because of our partnership, which was important at the time, but also because there are some universal principles and ideas, and terrorism is a universal evil, and that's as simple as it is. You can't do that. You can't do that to anybody, and nobody should do that. It's not an issue where you hesitate. It's not an issue where you say, "What do I get in exchange?" It's just you do the right thing because it's the right thing. And that's what I liked about that decision making in Azerbaijan. But what happened on 9/11, I think, is more of a sudden realization of more acute understanding of Azerbaijan's location, Azerbaijan's strategic importance. It's not that our partnership began prior to that. It's been developing quite well. Azerbaijan, for instance, since it was participating in 1999 in the NATO summit, there were partnerships and all these programs, energy cooperation was always going well. But at that point, there was a realization that is where that's what matters, that Azerbaijan matters, that Azerbaijan emerged at that point as a key partner for the United States in terms of security and defense and fighting terrorism. And that what happened on 9/11. I wouldn't say, probably it accelerated that understanding more than...
No, I like your description of a deepened understanding that came about quite rapidly because of the
unfortunate events.
Right.
But the partnership had been there before and continues on. Those things just, I think, accentuate what the partnership means.
Right. And we should say that this was Azerbaijan's re-emergence as an independent state. There wasn't a history short-lived immediately after World War I when there was briefly an independent Azerbaijan or a Transcaucasian republic.
It's actually a very unique experience, and we refer back to that very often. I mean, this flag is a flag of that republic of 1918, and that republic matters both because it's established several precedents, but also matters as an aspiration. Let me try to explain why.
Of course.
One is that this is the first ever republic. This is the first ever republic with a predominantly Muslim population in the world. At the time Azerbaijan emerged as a republic in 1918, on May 28th, most European nations were actually monarchies.
Yes.
Some of them still are monarchies. But at that time Azerbaijan said we want to have a republic, an independent nation. It also granted rights to vote for everybody, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, race, and belief, and religion. So now, if you look at that, the gender element is before the United States of America, because I know that the general voting rights came after 1919, which they came in Azerbaijan. Though, speaking of this, the governor of the great state of Wyoming pointed out that Wyoming was ahead of Azerbaijan and ahead of the United States of America, and that, so we're very proud of this.
Understood.
But so that by itself is a very important establishment. Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, Republic of 1918, did not last even full 2 years, 23 months. And then was invaded by the Bolshevik forces from
Yes.
Russia and was basically taken over. But what it set was a precedent. Precedent which resulted in the aspiration, which later became the basis for Azerbaijan Republic today. So what we have today is we build on that aspiration of equality, openness, and strong belief in independence. And I think that is something which is very important for us.
Let's build on that question by following up and asking what it's been like for Azerbaijan to come out from under being part of the Soviet Union, from Soviet dominance, to reestablish an independent state, a civil society. What have been the growing pains of a very young independent nation in modern terms?
I think what you ask is a key question, which I think we all ask ourselves and we all have experienced. If you look at me today, my country is twice younger than me. I'm twice older than the restored independence of the Republic of Azerbaijan. So that speaks for itself. It's a great responsibility to build a new nation. We have, you have to live and treasure it, because in a way it's very fragile when you begin. It's also decisions made by our generation will affect the future of our nation and the region as a whole. So I think we'll look back and think about that and see how much effort and heart went into this. Now, amazingly, it's also a great honor to be the first generation. I mean, think about this. When I look back, my former mentor, Ambassador Pashayev here, was the first ambassador of Azerbaijan in the United States. It's not that often that you get to do something first. I was the first consul general in Los Angeles. It's a great honor. It's important how we act today to build the future of our nation. I think, in a sense, that's a matter of identity. We build and we develop as we go. It's very fluid. It's not that stagnant. So we have our aspiration, and as we discussed earlier, from 1918, we have this aspiration. But we also need to work to make sure that we build a viable nation. And I am very grateful for the leadership of both President Heydar Ali and Ilham Aliyev today, who have been able to build a very pragmatic approach to foreign policy and to regional affairs, which says a number of things. One, our biggest and the greatest priority is to build a sustainable, a viable nation which makes its decisions independently. That's an absolute priority for us. For a long time, Azerbaijan decision making was dependent from bigger countries, some of them in the neighborhood. So what we would like to do is to make sure that whatever decisions are made by us in the capital of Azerbaijan, that is Baku. The other thing is we understand that we live in a bigger region, in a greater region. So stability and the future of the region is, we can't survive if the region does not survive. That's why Azerbaijan put a lot of effort into helping Georgia and Turkey to move forward to become a more integrated region. And we're working, for instance, our example of cooperation with Turkey and Georgia speaks for itself. And of course, another thing is we understand that in this world, where there's so many people looking at the differences, what Azerbaijan offers is quite unique in a way, because actually it shouldn't be unique, it should be a normal thing. I mean, if you think about that, to have in a society where different religions, different groups live all together, Muslims and Jews and Christians and others are friends and go to each other holidays and all this. We don't see it as something unique, but that's what Azerbaijan is. That is when you go to Azerbaijan and despite being where we are, let's say in a somewhat tense neighborhood, then You come to synagogues, you come to mosques, you come to churches, and what you see in Azerbaijan is not that we began understanding that now, but that for centuries, for thousands of years, all these people lived together and cooperated and built one nation. And I think that is something which Azerbaijan is today. I hope we keep and sustain that, and it's also what we offer to the world.
You use that word pragmatic, and I have to say, as I did my homework for this interview, that word pragmatic foreign policy comes up a lot.
Yes.
What does that mean in terms of shaping Azerbaijan's policy? What does it mean to be pragmatic in the neighborhood you live in, with very large neighbors like Iran and Russia?
I think that the number of things. One, and the most important, the one we mentioned, is
Right.
that the greatest priority is to make sure that your decisions are made first and foremost in the interest of your country and your people. Which, for instance, they are not ideological. We don't base our decision on ideology. It's not because we are a certain religion, not because we are a certain ethnicity, but because that or this or that decision correspond to the national interest of the Republic of Azerbaijan and to the people of Azerbaijan. Second, we need to look in the future. Pragmatic decision making, I think, means once President Aliyev, speaking in Washington, used a very interesting phrase. He said the difference between a politician and a leader is a politician thinks short term, leader thinks long term. You have to have vision to see where the country will be in a decade, in 2 decades, in 3 decades, in fact longer. We don't have a luxury to think short term. And this is what pragmatism means in our situation, is that you make decisions which do not necessarily take into account what happens today, but also what will happen in the next generation. Now, you can't predict the future for too long, that's also true. But you can make decisions which will make or break your future. That actually is an interesting point, because, and I wanted to, maybe in answer to your earlier question, when you go back to the situation in the former Soviet Union, we all share a common past. We all were part of the same country, same union, Soviet Union. But much of what we do today, much of where the countries are today, is based on not only on our common past, but on the decisions we made, the countries made since the very emergence of independent nations. And that's a very fundamental issue, because it's very often we could turn back and say, we have a common past, that's why it's so and so. But you see differences today among the nations. And those are differences which emerge from the decisions that were made early on in the independence. One example, you mentioned the oil-producing nation, such as Azerbaijan. It's not what you have, it's how you use them. People often ask me, what about oil? What about ice? Well, oil is a product. Someone has oil, someone has cookies, someone has copper. Anybody, you could have whatever. It's not that what you have, it's how you use it. And I think I'm proud to say that Azerbaijan has probably, in my view, done quite well in terms of using its resources and applying them towards a pragmatic foreign policy.
Let me go to we've literally talked around it geographically, but let me ask the sort of geostrategic question, the neighborhood you live in. Let's first of all talk about what the residual is of the Soviet Union collapses. Russia, still a major presence, still one of the Caspian littoral states, still a very real fact of life to your north. What's the impact of having both the history with Russia and the geographic proximity at this point?
The question you ask is a very interesting one, because it goes straight to the issue of identity and the nation building. I think we're indeed, geographic location is unique for Azerbaijan in many ways. People often ask us, are you in Asia or are you in Europe? And I always say I'm in the Caucasus. Of course, Azerbaijan is a part of Europe, geographically we're part of Council of Europe, part of OSCE, all these organizations. but also a active member of the Organization of Islamic Conference. We also
Yes.
cooperate with the Asian Development Bank. So this geographic identity actually provides us an opportunity to be much more open and much more involved with all sides. And I think that's important. That's a good thing for Azerbaijan. We're also the only country in the world, the only one, which borders both Russia and Iran. There are countries which border Russia and there are countries which border Iran. None of them borders both. Those are our two biggest neighbors. Both have very strong historic influence on Azerbaijan. Both are culturally very close to Azerbaijan. Sometimes that cultural influence is very positive. Sometimes it could get a little bit overwhelming. But in many ways, I think that's, I would say, and many of us would say, that's more of an opportunity than a liability. Let me go back to what you said. Since emerging as an independent nation, of course, going to the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was an economic collapse, there was a political turmoil. You've seen at the end of the Soviet Union, we had a conflict which emerged between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we could talk more about that great tragedy of our region. It also goes in Georgia, you see the similar problems in other places such as Moldova. So there you have an economic collapse, social and political upheaval, conflicts emerge. And trying to position yourself as an independent nation was not easy. At the same time, I think, I went to school in Moscow. We all speak Russian. We have, I think, I have the greatest respect for the Russian culture. We often speak to other people from the former Soviet Union who are not even Russians, in the Russian language. That's our lingua franca. So I have both deep respect for Russian culture. I think the Russian people have always been a central point in Eurasia and have worked very hard to build their nation. As long as we build our relationship on the basis of cooperation, mutual respect, and understanding that we are partners and independent partners and partners which are equal, stand on equal footing to each other, I think Azerbaijan has always been very open and welcoming to the Russian presence in the region. Of course, you provided that, of course, there was a strong respect for our independence and, most important, for our independent decision making. I think, and it's an interesting point to that, because I think our Russian partners respect you more as an independent partner than an independent one. And I think that is, by itself, is a very interesting indication. I think that goes for everybody. So in that respect, I think we have now worked up a very positive overall relation with our Russian partners. The trade is going up, and we have a very large community of Azeris in Russia, Azerbaijanis. Russian leaders have repeatedly stated that respect for Russian culture and Russian language in Azerbaijan is quite exemplary. We have Russian-speaking schools, we have Russian universities. Moscow State University has a branch in Azerbaijan. There's a great respect for that.
Is that true for the younger generation as well, or as independence has come along, has that weakened the cultural ties to Russia?
It has weakened in a sense, because of course the Russian presence is not, while it's still quite strongly felt, it's not the only one. There's a lot of Turkish influence, there's English language culture present now in the region. But at the same time, I think Russia has been and will remain our big neighbor.
If we could, Ambassador, let's just go back, because we were right at the end of part of our video, to talk about the environmental question. And I had asked you about the caviar industry.
And as we talked about that, sturgeon is a protected species, of course. The caviar has certain restrictions on being sold. I like my caviar, but we have to be environmentally conscious. But as we talked about, Azerbaijan today tries to repopulate the sturgeon population, and there are farms which produce millions and millions of eggs, letting them into the scales, schools of eggs, letting them into the water tank to repopulate the population. But that's, of course, is an issue.
Just trying to save that industry.
It's a unique animal.
Let me turn then. Can you explain to us perhaps a bit of the role that Azerbaijan has played in supporting the U.S. and the ISAF presence in Afghanistan, but you've also had, as you said, boots on the ground in Iraq, you've had boots on the ground in Kosovo. Why would Azerbaijan, small as it is, relatively speaking, involve itself in those operations?
You're right. I mean, as you pointed out, as of September 11, the understanding in the United States, I think, of the importance of Azerbaijan and that partnership has been much more acute. Azerbaijan also wants to be a responsible member of the international community. Some things we do because we have commitments to our partners. Some things we do because we believe in them being absolutely right or wrong. In terms of Iraq, Azerbaijan had troops in Iraq. They guarded the Haditha Dam. It was a very interesting experience, and we were basically the only Muslim boots on the ground as a part of the coalition. Our guys were also serving in the Balkans, and today a key part of the operation in Afghanistan, I said. Moreover, Azerbaijan today is a excuse me. Azerbaijan today is a key part of the NDN, Northern Distribution Network. Americans fly over Azerbaijan to Afghanistan and back and forth, and not only Americans, NATO troops. In fact, earlier this year I visited the Scott Air Force Base, the headquarters of US Transportation Command and Mobility Command. And they told me that just within several months of this year, 2,200 lives of coalition forces were saved because Azerbaijan unconditionally provided access to Mediterranean flights. So this partnership is abiding and strong. Why Azerbaijan does it? Because we believe in our strategic partnership with the United States. We think that we share values. We believe that the United States stands for something, and we believe that partnership is good for the region. Now, in terms of Afghanistan, part of the reason we try to participate because we want to see regional development. We care for the people of Afghanistan. We don't want that country to be abandoned once again and become a center of instability. We understand that the best hope for the stability and lack of radicalism in the region would be a secure and stable and prosperous Afghanistan. That's our commitment to them as well. Therefore, Azerbaijan has already committed 2 million euros to the Army Trust Fund in Afghanistan. We have our cooperation with Afghanistan and with ISAF is not limited to the overflights and just our troops being in Afghanistan. We provide capacity building to police, to officials, to the foreign service. We're now talking about linking, enhancing transit opportunities to Central Asia and Eurasia for Afghanistan and for other nations. So our hope is that we'll also be a part of the solution for the Afghanistan problem.
Ambassador Suleimanov, thank you so much. I've taken shamelessly of your time today, but it's been a fascinating discussion. And thank you for joining us at Diplomatic Connections. We hope that you'll enjoy and benefit from hearing ambassadors express their country's positions and explain why they approach the world as they do. That's what we hope Diplomatic Connections is all about, showing you the connections between life and people and economies and security concerns, and most of all, shared hopes and dreams. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll come back to the website and join us to view other interviews just as soon as you can. Thank you.